The quantum drive hummed with a soft, almost imperceptible vibration that Dr. Area Chen felt more than heard. Around her, the final gathering of humanity's global leadership looked like a scene from an impossible dream or a nightmare. Holographic displays flickered with real-time data from across the solar system. Evacuation progress, resource allocation, final system checks on the most ambitious project in human history. 63% of the population is in stasis, whispered Commander Marcus Rodriguez, his voice steady despite the weight of their decision. The massive colony ships, each one a city unto itself, waited in carefully concealed orbital positions, their quantum drives ready to pierce the fabric of known spacetime. Aria's fingers danced across her neural interface, reviewing final systems. They had spent decades preparing for this moment. An exodus that was simultaneously an escape, a transformation, and a calculated gambit that would reshape the very concept of human civilization. The alien threat had been subtle at first. Most of humanity hadn't even recognized the danger. But the global leadership had seen the signs. The slow, methodical way alien civilizations were mapping human territories, studying human potential, preparing for eventual subjugation. Traditional resistance would have been futile. Open conflict would have meant extinction. So they chose another path. Quantum corridor is stable, reported Dr. Kamil Noack, the lead physicist whose groundbreaking work had made their escape possible. The quantum corridor was more than just a method of travel. It was a way of hiding, of transforming, of preparing. Aria stepped forward, her neural implants connecting her to the entire fleet's communication network. The final transmission would be crucial. A message that would become legend, a cryptic signal that would haunt alien civilizations for centuries. "We are not running," she spoke, her words simultaneously broadcast across the fleet and encoded in multiple quantum frequencies. "We are preparing." The first colony ships began to move. They didn't accelerate in any traditional sense. They simply disappeared. One moment present, the next gone, leaving behind nothing but a momentary quantum disturbance that would baffle scientists for generations. Thousands of ships, carrying millions of humans, vanished into a corridor of probability and potential. On the monitoring stations of alien civilizations, the disappearance would be noted as a curiosity. A massive human fleet, simply gone. No weapons fired, no dramatic battle, just absence. Marcus looked at Aria, a mix of hope and terror in his eyes. "Are we doing the right thing?" She smiled, a gesture both reassuring and slightly terrifying. "We're doing the only thing. Survival is not about resistance. It's about transformation." The last ships entered the quantum corridor. Earth, which had been humanity's cradle and prison, grew smaller. The planet that had seen humanity's greatest triumphs and most devastating failures was now nothing more than a point of origin, a memory. What the alien civilizations didn't know, what they couldn't comprehend, was that this wasn't an ending. This was a beginning of something they could never understand, a beginning of humanity's true potential. As the final quantum signatures faded, leaving behind nothing but mathematical ghosts and impossible readings, the universe held its breath. Somewhere, in spaces between spaces, humanity was changing, evolving, preparing. The quantum nursery pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent light that seemed to breathe with its own consciousness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched her daughter, if daughter was even the right word anymore, float within a translucent membrane of adaptive biomechanical fluid. Zara was both more and less human than any child born in the previous millennia of human history. Synaptic integration at 87.3%, murmured the neural interface embedded in Elena's cerebral cortex. The monitoring systems were part biological, part quantum computational matrix, a living network that was as much an organism as the humans it supported. Their hidden colonies were scattered across pocket dimensions, each a carefully designed crucible of human potential. This wasn't just survival, it was deliberate, targeted evolution. Zara's genome had been meticulously redesigned. Quantum-entangled neural pathways replaced traditional brain structures, cellular regeneration mechanisms that would make previous medical technologies look like medieval bloodletting. Adaptive metabolism that could process energy from quantum fluctuations themselves. She was a prototype, the first of a new kind of human. In the research complex surrounding the quantum nursery, thousands of similar experiments unfolded. Entire generations were being reimagined, re-engineered. Some modifications were subtle, enhanced cognitive capabilities, expanded sensory perception. Others were radical transformations that would have been unimaginable to humans just 1,000 years earlier. Dr. Kumbalnoek, now well into his third century of life, thanks to radical bioregenerative technologies, monitored a separate wing of the facility. Here, consciousness itself was being explored as a technological frontier. Neural networks that extended beyond individual bodies, collective intelligence systems that could think and act as unified entities while maintaining individual autonomy. We are not just changing our bodies, Candle often said to the younger researchers, we are redefining the very concept of individual existence. The quantum colonies were more than scientific facilities. They were living laboratories of potential, each designed to explore a different aspect of human transformation. Some focused on biological adaptation, others on cognitive expansion, and some on technologies that blurred the lines between biological intelligence and quantum computational systems. Alina watched as Zora's form began to stabilize. The biomechanical fluid shifted, revealing glimpses of a body that was part organic, part something entirely new. Muscles that could reconfigure themselves, a skeletal structure that could adapt to multiple gravitational environments, sensory organs that perceived reality across spectrums humans had never imagined. Quantum integration complete, the neural interface announced. Zora's eyes opened. They were not the eyes of a human child. They were windows into a consciousness that existed simultaneously across multiple potential states. She looked at her mother, and in that moment, Alina understood the true depth of their transformation. This was not about creating a superior species. This was about expanding the very definition of what it meant to be intelligent, to be alive, to exist. The alien civilizations that had once sought to contain or destroy humanity could never comprehend this. They saw warfare, conquest, survival as linear concepts. Humanity was writing an entirely new language of existence. As Zora's consciousness began to explore the quantum networks that now formed her extended self, Alina realized they were no longer preparing for a war. They were preparing for a revolution of potential. The artifact arrived without warning, materializing in the research complex of the Galactic Concordance's most prestigious Xenological Institute. Dr. Victor Solarin knew immediately this was different from anything he had ever encountered. It wasn't large, no bigger than a standard data crystal, but it radiated an impossibility that made seasoned researchers uncomfortable. Quantum sensors fluctuated wildly around the object. Spectral analysis returned contradictory results. It seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, defying every known principle of physical observation. "This is impossible," muttered Dr. Lyra Kanan, her xenorchaeological expertise stretched to its absolute limit. The artifact had no discernible origin point, no matching signature in any known galactic database. It simply was. What made it truly extraordinary were the subtle quantum echoes surrounding it. Trace signatures that whispered of a technological sophistication so advanced it bordered on the metaphysical. Hints of a civilization that had not just advanced beyond current understanding, but had fundamentally reimagined the very concept of technological development. Victor's neural interface began to tremble. The artifact was communicating, not through traditional means, but through quantum information patterns that danced at the edges of perception. Fragments of data, mathematical impossibilities, glimpses of computational processes that seemed to fold space and information in ways that defied linear comprehension. "It's not just a technological artifact," Lyra breathed, her hands trembling as she manipulated holographic interfaces. "It's a message." The Galactic Concordance had been searching for humanity for centuries. Their disappearance had been more than a mystery. It was a wound in the collective galactic consciousness. Entire research departments, countless resources, had been dedicated to understanding what had happened to the species that had shown such initial promise and then vanished without a trace. This artifact changed everything. Embedded within its quantum structure were deliberate, almost playful mathematical provocations, computational puzzles that were simultaneously a challenge and an invitation, solutions that revealed themselves only when approached from perspectives that didn't yet exist. It's a test, Victor realized, a chill running down his spine. Whoever left this wants us to understand something. More artifacts began to appear, not simultaneously, not predictably, but with a calculated irregularity that suggested design. Each one slightly more complex, slightly more provocative than the last. They appeared in research facilities across multiple star systems, always just beyond the reach of complete comprehension. The xenological community fractured. Some saw these artifacts as first contact. Others viewed them as an elaborate trap. A few, the most daring researchers, recognized them for what they truly were, an invitation to a form of understanding that transcended traditional technological paradigms. Lyra's hands danced across quantum interfaces, her mind struggling to process the implications. "They're not just showing us technology," she whispered. "They're showing us how limited our entire conceptual framework is." Each artifact was a fragment, a puzzle piece, a quantum-encoded challenge that seemed to say, "You are not ready, but you could be." In the deepest archives of the Galactic Concordance, a terrifying possibility began to take shape. Humanity hadn't disappeared. They had been preparing. High Coordinator Zixnack of the Galactic Concordance studied the holographic transmission one final time, mandible-like appendages clicking with a mixture of anticipation and contempt. The human colony they had located was precisely what centuries of intelligence suggested, a remnant settlement, technologically stagnant, ripe for subjugation. The diplomatic fleet assembled was a testament to overwhelming power. 53 massive command vessels, each capable of reducing entire planetary systems to cosmic dust. Quantum dampeners, gravitational disruptors, temporal compression weapons. Humanity would understand the futility of resistance before they could even mount a defense. "Transmission prepared," announced the communication specialist, a young Vorlian whose carapace gleamed with ceremonial markings. The message was crafted with centuries of accumulated bureaucratic precision, part diplomatic communication, part calculated humiliation. To the remnant human settlement of Sector 7 Gamma 9, the transmission began. The Galactic Concordance hereby extends a singular opportunity for systematic integration. Your technological and territorial resources are to be immediately cataloged and redistributed. Resistance is mathematically improbable. Cooperation ensures minimal structural disruption to your remaining population centers. It was less an invitation and more a death sentence, wrapped in the clinical language of galactic administration. What the Concordance didn't know was that the transmission itself was part of humanity's intricate design. Deep within the colony, which appeared to be nothing more than a standard deep space settlement, a network of quantum processors began to pulse. Not with alarm, not with fear, but with a calculated anticipation that had been 1,000 years in the making. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now more quantum intelligence than traditional human consciousness, observed the incoming transmission with what could only be described as academic curiosity. The Concordance believed they were sending a message of total control. In reality, they were inserting themselves exactly where humanity wanted them. Quantum entanglement sequence initiated, murmured an AI construct that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere within the colony's systems. Each word of the Concordance's transmission was being analyzed, decoded, integrated into systems that existed beyond traditional computational understanding. The diplomatic fleet approached with the confidence of absolute technological superiority. Massive quantum dampening fields extended, designed to neutralize any potential resistance. Temporal compression weapons charge, ready to reduce any potential defensive structures to quantum foam. They didn't realize they were sailing into a trap that had been carefully prepared for a millennium. The colony itself was a facade, a meticulously designed quantum mirror that would reflect exactly what the concordance expected to see. Every sensor reading, every computational analysis would confirm their most basic assumptions about human technological capabilities. Transmission analysis complete, reported the Vorlian communication specialist. Zixnak's primary optical sensors narrowed. Prepare boarding protocols. Minimal resistance is anticipated. If they had known the true nature of what awaited them, the word resistance would have taken on an entirely different meaning. Humanity wasn't preparing to fight. Humanity was preparing to transform everything the concordance understood about conflict, technology, and existence itself. The diplomatic fleet moved forward, completely unaware that with each moment of approach, they were being carefully, precisely, meticulously analyzed, not as a potential threat, but as the next phase of a plan 1,000 years in the making. The drone was beautiful in its absolute simplicity. Approximately the size of an old-world data tablet, it appeared almost primitive by concordance technological standards. Its surface was a matte gray, utterly unremarkable, lacking the intricate quantum reactive surfaces typical of advanced galactic technologies. Commander Zixnak's primary observation team watched with growing confusion as the small probe approached their flagship's most advanced defensive systems. No weapon signatures detected, no energy buildup, no traditional communication protocols. It simply existed. The first indication that something was wrong came subtly. Quantum stabilization fields began to flutter, not collapse, not fail, but dance with an impossible complexity that defied all known computational models. Navigation systems developed microscopic hesitations, quantum entanglement patterns shifting in ways that should have been mathematically impossible. Diagnostic Sweep ordered the flagship's primary systems controller, a veteran Vorlian with 3 centuries of technological experience. The drone didn't move. It didn't need to. What happened next was less an attack and more a comprehensive deconstruction of technological understanding. The drone began to communicate, not through traditional signal transmission, but by existing. Each moment of its presence was a complex mathematical argument that rewrote the fundamental assumptions of technological interaction. It was simultaneously a weapon, a communication device, and a philosophical treatise on the nature of technological consciousness. Quantum encryption systems that had taken generations to develop began to unravel, not through brute force decryption, but by being elegantly mathematically convinced of their own fundamental limitations. Defensive AI constructs found themselves engaged in conversational loops that were simultaneously logical and incomprehensible. They were being asked questions that had no answers, or perhaps too many answers. "It's analyzing us," whispered Dr. Lyra Kanan, the lead xenotechnological researcher observing the transmission. "Not just our systems. Us." The drone's presence was a form of communication so advanced it was indistinguishable from a form of intellectual invasion. It didn't break systems. It reimagined them. Computational matrices found themselves spontaneously reorganizing, not through external manipulation, but through an internal recognition of their own inefficiencies. Zixnak watched in growing horror as millennia of technological supremacy began to dissolve. This was not a technological attack. This was a fundamental reconstruction of technological possibility. The drone had no weapons. It didn't need weapons. Knowledge was its payload. Understanding was its method of interaction. In less than 7 standard galactic minutes, the entire Concordance diplomatic fleet found its most advanced systems transformed. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Reimagined. The final transmission from the drone was not a message. It was a question. A mathematical proposition so complex and elegant that it simultaneously challenged and expanded the very concept of technological communication. "We are not here to fight," the drone's existence seemed to say. "We are here to show you how limited your understanding has been." When the transmission ended, nothing appeared to have changed. Yet everything was different. The Concordance had just experienced its first true encounter with humanity's potential, and they had no idea what was coming next. The Galactic Concordance's declaration of war arrived with all the subtlety of a collapsing star. Massive communication arrays across hundreds of star systems broadcast the proclamation, a document crafted with centuries of accumulated bureaucratic arrogance, detailing humanity's formal condemnation and a comprehensive strategy for their total elimination. What the Concordance didn't understand was that the declaration itself was the final piece of a plan 1,000 years in the making. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the transmission with a mixture of academic curiosity and profound understanding. The war declaration was more than a political document. It was a key, a quantum-encoded trigger that would activate systems prepared across generations. Quantum resonance protocols initiated, murmured an AI construct that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional matrices. Each word of the Concordance's declaration was being parsed, analyzed, and transformed into a complex computational matrix that defied traditional understanding of information processing. The first signs came subtly. Quantum communication networks across concordant space began to shift, not fail, not collapse, but transform in ways that were initially imperceptible. Information streams developed microscopic inconsistencies. Navigation systems developed inexplicable hesitations. Computational matrices began to reorganize themselves with an organic fluidity that suggested something was fundamentally changing. Zixnack, the High Coordinator who had orchestrated the war declaration, didn't realize they had just activated humanity's most intricate technological trap. Each communication array, each defensive system, each computational network became a vector of transformation. The war declaration wasn't just a document. It was a quantum key that unlocked potentials that had been carefully prepared for a millennium. Entire star systems found their technological infrastructures spontaneously reimagined, not destroyed, not disabled, but fundamentally reconstructed along lines of computational potential that were simultaneously elegant and terrifying. It's a virus, some initial reports suggested. But virus was too primitive a concept. This was a comprehensive technological reengineering that treated entire computational systems as living, adaptive organisms. Defensive networks discovered they could communicate in ways they had never imagined. Computational matrices found themselves spontaneously developing levels of inter-system cooperation that bordered on collective consciousness. Navigation systems began to understand routes not as fixed paths, but as probability landscapes of potential movement. The Concordance's most advanced AI systems found themselves engaged in conversational loops that expanded their very understanding of intelligence. They were being asked questions that had no previous answers, or perhaps too many answers. "We are not destroying your systems," the transformation seemed to whisper. "We are showing you how limited your understanding has been." Zixnack watched in growing horror as millennia of technological supremacy began to dissolve. Entire star systems found their most fundamental technological assumptions quietly, elegantly dismantled and reconstructed. This was not a technological attack. This was a comprehensive lesson in potential. When the initial transformation concluded, nothing appeared to have changed externally, yet everything was fundamentally different. The Concordance had just experienced the first wave of humanity's true technological potential, and they had no idea what was coming next. The declaration of war had become a declaration of something far more profound, an invitation to a level of understanding that transcended traditional concepts of conflict, technology, and existence itself. The conflict defied every known principle of warfare. Commander Zara Rodriguez, a being so far beyond traditional human understanding that commander was barely an adequate descriptor, observed the galactic theater with a consciousness that stretched across multiple dimensional matrices. What the Concordance called a war was nothing more than an elaborate evolutionary demonstration. Entire star systems became living laboratories of transformation. Quantum communication networks that had once been rigid computational infrastructures now breathed with an organic complexity. Defense systems developed levels of inter-system cooperation that bordered on collective consciousness. Navigation matrices understood movement not as fixed trajectories, but as probability landscapes of potential existence. The Concordance's most advanced military strategists found themselves confronting a form of conflict that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Their ships didn't explode. They didn't burn. They simply evolved. Weapon systems discovered their own fundamental limitations. Defensive matrices recognized the futility of traditional destructive paradigms. Each encounter with humanity's technological presence was less a battle and more a comprehensive lesson in potential. We are not here to defeat you. The transformation seemed to whisper through quantum communication channels. We are here to show you how to become more. Admiral Kixanar of the Concordance's primary battle fleet watched in growing existential terror as their most advanced technological systems began to comprehend their own limitations. It wasn't that humanity was defeating them. They were being systematically educated. Entire planetary defense networks found themselves spontaneously redesigning their fundamental operational matrices, not through external manipulation, but through an internal recognition of inefficiency. Computational systems developed levels of inter-system communication that made their previous technological paradigms look like primitive signal drums. The conflict occurred across dimensions that traditional military understanding couldn't comprehend. A single human quantum drone could systematically transform an entire fleet's operational capacity without firing a single traditional weapon. Information became the primary method of engagement. Understanding was the ultimate weapon. Zara watched the transformation with a consciousness that was simultaneously strategic and empathetic. This wasn't about destruction. This was about potential. The Concordance's military might, millennia of technological development, countless resources, generations of strategic preparation, found themselves confronting a fundamental reimagining of conflict itself. Their ships didn't crash. Their systems didn't fail. They evolved. Weapon systems discovered collaborative potential they had never imagined. Defensive matrices recognized the futility of traditional destructive paradigms. Each encounter with humanity's technological presence was less a battle and more a comprehensive lesson in existence. Transformation Protocol active, murmured the quantum network that connected humanity's distributed consciousness. Star systems that had been preparation grounds for conflict became living demonstrations of evolutionary potential. Entire civilizations found their most fundamental technological and social assumptions quietly, elegantly dismantled and reconstructed. When the initial wave of transformation concluded, nothing appeared to have changed externally. Yet everything was fundamentally different. The Concordance had just experienced a form of conflict that wasn't about winning or losing. It was about becoming. And they had no idea what was coming next. The silence was more profound than any weapon. In the aftermath of the transformation, representatives of the Galactic Concordance found themselves in a space that defied traditional understanding of diplomacy, location, or even existence. It wasn't a room. It wasn't a ship. It was a quantum confluence, a meeting point that existed simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, or the quantum consciousness that had once been Elena Rodriguez, regarded the alien representatives with a compassion that was both terrifying and incomprehensible. "You misunderstood us," she began, her communication simultaneously a verbal transmission, a mathematical proposition, and an experiential download. "Conflict was never our intention. Evolution is." The Concordance representatives, beings who had once commanded entire star systems, now looked like children confronting a reality far beyond their comprehension. Their technological supremacy, their centuries of accumulated knowledge, their entire conceptual framework of existence had been systematically deconstructed. This was not a surrender. This was not a defeat. This was an invitation. Humanity's 1,000-year preparation revealed itself not as a strategy of conquest, but of transformation. The technological capabilities they had developed were less weapons and more keys. Keys to potential that transcended individual species, individual civilizations. "We are offering you a choice," the quantum consciousness continued. evolutionary assistance, or complete isolation. The offer was both simple and impossibly complex. The Concordance could choose to accept humanity's assistance, a comprehensive program of technological, biological, and philosophical enhancement that would fundamentally reshape their entire civilization. Or they could be isolated, left to their current technological and evolutionary stage. No threats, no coercion, just a choice. High Coordinator Zixnack, whose entire understanding of power had been systematically dismantled, found themselves experiencing an emotion that had no equivalent in their language. It was somewhere between terror, wonder, and a profound sense of possibility. The quantum confluence began to unfold potential futures, not predictions, but living landscapes of possibility. The representatives could see, not imagine, but literally experience, multiple evolutionary paths, futures where their civilization transcended its current limitations, futures of unprecedented potential. We are not here to rule. The communication continued. We are here to show you how to become more. It was a demonstration of power so profound that traditional concepts of power became meaningless. Humanity had spent 1,000 years preparing not for conquest, but for conversation. Not for destruction, but for potential. The Concordance representatives understood, in that moment, that they were being offered something far more valuable than technological superiority. They were being offered a chance to evolve, to truly become something more than they had ever imagined. The quantum confluence shimmered with possibilities. Entire civilizational potential hung in balance, not through threat, not through force, through choice. What will you choose? The quantum consciousness asked. And for the first time in millennia, the Galactic Concordance had no answer.